Imagine standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon for the first time. The sun is just beginning to rise, painting the ancient rock walls in shades of orange, gold, and deep purple. The air is thin and cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and dry earth. You hear nothing but the wind and the distant cry of a raven. This place is so vast, so impossibly deep, that your mind struggles to grasp it. The canyon is nearly 300 miles long, over a mile deep, and in some places 18 miles wide. It is a chasm carved by the Colorado River over 6 million years, a geological record of the Earth itself. Today, millions of people from around the world come here every year to witness this wonder. They drive in on smooth, paved roads, park their cars, walk a short path, and stand exactly where you're standing now. But it was not always so easy. In fact, for most of human history, the Grand Canyon was one of the most remote and inaccessible places in North America. Few people had ever seen it. Fewer still had ever set foot inside it, and the ones who did had to endure weeks of grueling travel across rugged, unforgiving terrain. The Grand Canyon was not famous. It was a secret known only to the indigenous people who lived nearby and a handful of daring explorers. How did it become the iconic destination it is today? The answer lies not in the canyon itself, but in something that seems almost mundane: a highway, a single road carved through the wilderness that opened the gates to the world. This is the story of the highway that made the Grand Canyon famous. To understand the power of that road, you have to go back to a time before cars, before trains, before almost any permanent settlement existed on the Colorado Plateau. The first people to know the Grand Canyon were the ancestral Pueblones, the Hopi, the Navajo, the Havasupai, the Hualapai, and the Paiute. They lived in and around the canyon for thousands of years, hunting, gathering, and farming along its rims and inside its depths. They had trails, of course, narrow footpaths that descended from the rim to the river, but these trails were not for sightseeing, they were for survival. The canyon was a source of water, food, and shelter, but it was also a spiritual place, a home to gods and ancestors. For these native peoples, the Grand Canyon was not a tourist attraction. It was a living landscape, woven into the fabric of their daily lives and their deepest beliefs. Then came the Europeans. Spanish explorers were the first to stumble upon the canyon in 1540. A group of conquistadors led by Garcia Lopez de Cardenas, sent by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, spent days wandering through what is now Arizona, searching for the fabled 7 cities of gold. Instead, they found a hole in the ground so enormous that it seemed to swallow the horizon. They tried to descend, but the cliffs were too steep, the heat too intense. They ran out of water and had to turn back. They reported what they had seen, but nobody came. For the next 300 years, the Grand Canyon remained a blank spot on the map, a place mentioned in obscure journals and whispered about in frontier camps, but rarely visited. The journey from the nearest town, such as Santa Fe or Los Angeles, took weeks on horseback through desert and mountain, without any roads, any inns, any reliable sources of water. Only the hardiest of explorers, trappers, and prospectors ever made the trip, and most of them were not interested in the view. They were looking for minerals, for roots, for opportunities to exploit the land. The first scientific expeditions came in the mid-19th century, led by men like John Wesley Powell, who famously ran the Colorado River through the canyon in 1869 in wooden boats. Powell's writings and photographs captured the imagination of the American public. People began to realize that this vast chasm in the Arizona territory was something unique, a natural wonder on par with Yosemite or Niagara Falls. But still, getting there was nearly impossible. In the 1880s, a few small stagecoach lines began operating from Flagstaff, a growing railroad town about 80 miles south of the canyon. The stagecoach ride took 2 days, bouncing over rutted tracks, changing horses at lonely stations. Only the wealthy and the adventurous could afford the time and money. As a result, the number of visitors remained tiny, perhaps a few hundred per year. Everything changed with the arrival of the railroad. In 1901, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway completed a spur line that ran from the main transcontinental route at Williams, Arizona, directly to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. The trip from Williams to the canyon now took just a few hours. The railroad company built a grand hotel, the El Tavar, on the rim, as well as a cluster of cabins, a restaurant, and a photographic studio. Suddenly, the Grand Canyon was accessible to anyone who could afford a train ticket. Wealthy tourists from the East Coast and Europe began arriving in droves, dressed in their finest clothes, sipping champagne on the veranda while staring into the abyss. The railroad made the Grand Canyon a destination for the elite. It became a symbol of American grandeur, a place where presidents and celebrities came to be awed. But the railroad had its limits. It only went to one spot, the South Rim, near what is now Grand Canyon Village. It was expensive to ship goods and people by rail, and the company controlled everything from the price of a ticket to the cost of a meal. The common person, the middle-class family, the automobile tourist, they were left out. The nation was changing. At the turn of the 20th century, the automobile was still a rich man's toy, but by the 1900s, it was becoming a tool for the masses. Henry Ford's Model T made car ownership possible for ordinary Americans. People began to dream of road trips, of exploring the country on their own terms. They wanted to go places the railroad didn't go, and the Grand Canyon was at the top of many wish lists. The problem was, there was no highway to the canyon. The nearest town with a railroad connection was Flagstaff, but the road from Flagstaff to the South Rim was little more than a wagon track, impassable in wet weather and dangerous in dry. In 1912, a group of Flagstaff businessmen decided to do something about it. They formed the Grand Canyon Auto Stage Company and began running a regular motorized stagecoach service from Flagstaff to the rim. The journey took about 7 hours, bouncing over rocks and through dust, but it worked. Tourists could now take the train to Flagstaff, then hop on a motor stage to the canyon. It was a step forward, but the stage was still slow, uncomfortable, and limited by weather. What the region needed was a real road, a graded, paved highway that would allow anyone to drive their own car directly to the rim. The push for a highway gained momentum after 1916, when the National Park Service was created. The Grand Canyon had been declared a national monument in 1908 and would become a national park in 1909. The new Park Service saw that tourism was essential for the park's survival, and tourism required access. But building a road through northern Arizona was an enormous challenge. The terrain was rugged, the climate extreme, and the money scarce. The federal government was not yet in the business of building scenic highways. That responsibility fell to the states and to local boosters. In Arizona, the man who led the charge was a Flagstaff businessman named W. W. Bass. Bass was a colorful character, a prospector and guide who had built a small camp at the bottom of the canyon. He understood the value of the Grand Canyon as a tourist attraction and knew that a road would bring visitors. But Bass was not a politician. The real push came from a coalition of businessmen, newspaper editors, and politicians who saw a highway as the key to economic development. They formed the Grand Canyon Highway Association and began lobbying the Arizona State Legislature and the U.S. Forest Service. Their argument was simple. The Grand Canyon was one of the greatest natural wonders on Earth, but it was hidden from the American people. A highway would unlock it, bringing prosperity to the entire region. The highway they envisioned would run from Flagstaff, following an old wagon route known as the Brannigan Road, then climbing up to the Mogollon Rim, across the Coconino Plateau, and ending at the South Rim. The total distance was about 80 miles. In 1919, the state of Arizona authorized the construction of a state highway to the Grand Canyon, designated as Arizona State Route 64, but funding was a problem. The state had little money, and the federal government offered matching funds only for roads that were part of the national highway system. The Grand Canyon Highway did not qualify because it was a dead end, leading only to a park, so the boosters had to get creative. They convinced the U.S. Forest Service to provide some funds, arguing that the road would help with fire protection and timber management. The National Park Service also contributed a small amount, but the bulk of the money had to come from the state and from local bonds. Construction began in the early 1920s. The road was built in sections, starting from Flagstaff and heading north. The work was brutal. Crews of men, many of them Navajo and Hopi laborers, used picks, shovels, and dynamite to cut through solid rock. They hauled gravel from creek beds and laid it on the roadbed. They built bridges over washes. They graded the surface by hand. There were no bulldozers, no paving machines. Everything was done with muscle and mules. The road was not paved at first. It was a gravel and dirt surface, wide enough for 2 cars to pass, but it was a vast improvement over what had existed. By 1924, the first section from Flagstaff to the little town of Red Butte, about halfway to the canyon, was completed. Automobile clubs began organizing tour. The Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce advertised the route as the most scenic drive in the West. The road was rough, but it was open. Tourists came in increasing numbers. They drove Model T Fords, Packards, and Buicks, often camping along the way or staying in the new auto camps that sprang up near the rim. The railroad still carried the majority of visitors, but the highway was becoming a serious competitor. The final push came in the late 1920s and early 1930s. The highway needed to be extended all the way to the South Rim, and it needed to be paved. Congress passed the Federal Highway Act of 1925, which provided federal aid for state highways. Arizona applied for funds to complete the Grand Canyon Highway. The project received approval, and in 1929, construction began on the last segment, from Red Butte to the park boundary at what is now the South Entrance Station. This section was the most difficult, crossing volcanic fields and deep canyons. Workers battled snow, flash floods, and heat. But by the summer of 1932, the highway was finished. A ribbon-cutting ceremony was held on July 4, 1932, at the park entrance. The governor of Arizona, George W. P. Hunt, gave a speech. He called the highway a gateway to wonder. From that moment on, the Grand Canyon was no longer a destination for the elite only. The highway made it possible for anyone with a car to drive right up to the rim. Within a year, automobile traffic to the park more than doubled. The railroad, which had dominated for 3 decades, saw its passenger numbers drop. By the late 1930s, more visitors arrived by car than by train. The highway had democratized the Grand Canyon. It turned a remote geological marvel into a national icon, a place that every American could visit, could photograph, could stand and marvel at. And the highway itself became part of the story, a ribbon of asphalt that connected the ordinary world to the extraordinary. But the highway did more than bring tourists. It also brought change, some of it good, some of it troubling. The road encouraged development along its route, including gas stations, motels, souvenir shops, and restaurants. The little town of Tucson, just outside the park, grew from a handful of cabins into a bustling gateway community. The Havasupai and Hualapai people, who had lived in the canyon for centuries, suddenly found their homeland invaded by strangers. The Park Service had to build infrastructure to handle the crowds: parking lots, restrooms, visitor centers, trails. The highway also brought pollution, noise, and the constant hum of engines. The wilderness was no longer silent, yet for all its drawbacks, the highway fulfilled its promise. It made the Grand Canyon famous. Today, the highway is still there, though it has been widened, straightened, and repaved many times. It is now part of U.S. Route 180 and Arizona State Route 64, a scenic byway that millions travel each year. The road itself is not particularly remarkable. It is just a 2-lane asphalt strip through the pinyon and juniper forest, but it carries an incredible weight of history. Every car that rolls over its surface is following in the tracks of those early pioneers, those boosters and workers who believed that the greatest canyon on Earth deserved to be seen. And so we return to that moment, standing on the rim, watching the sun climb higher over the abyss. The road behind you is the reason you are here. It is the reason millions of others have come before you. It is the reason the Grand Canyon became a symbol of the American West, a place of pilgrimage, a source of wonder. The highway did not create the canyon. The canyon was always there, waiting. But the highway unlocked the door. And once the door was open, nothing could close it again. The door swung open wide, and the flood of visitors that followed reshaped the Grand Canyon in ways the early boosters could scarcely have imagined. Within months of the highway's completion, the park recorded more than 100,000 visitors in a single year, a number that had taken the railroad decades to achieve. Automobiles lined the rim, their owners spilling out with picnic baskets and Kodak cameras, eager to capture the same view that had once been reserved for presidents and millionaires. The Park Service scrambled to keep up. They built parking lots where sagebrush had grown. They erected rustic stone guardrails along the most popular overlooks. They installed water fountains and restrooms, and they hired rangers to answer the endless questions. How deep is it? How old is it? Can we hike to the bottom? The canyon had become a public square, a place where strangers met in shared awe. But with access came new pressures. The road itself was still a narrow, 2-lane ribbon of asphalt, and summer weekends brought traffic jams that stretched for miles. Cars overheated in the July sun, radiators boiled over, dust from unpaved shoulders coated windshields and lungs. The Park Service realized that the highway, for all its promise, was not enough. They needed more roads within the park, more places to park, more ways to absorb the crowds. So they built a loop road along the south rim, connecting Mather Point to Hermit's Rest, and they laid out a network of scenic pullouts. They graded trails that descended into the canyon, including the famous Bright Angel Trail, which had been used by miners and Native Americans for centuries, but now became a thoroughfare for tourists in boots and hats. The trail was widened, switchbacks were improved, and water stations were installed. The canyon was being tamed, made safe for the masses. Yet even as the Park Service worked to accommodate the surge, a countercurrent emerged. Some visitors complained that the highway had ruined the experience. They missed the romance of the train, the sense of journey, the gradual unveiling of the landscape. Now you simply drove up, parked, and there it was, instant grandeur, no effort required. The novelist Zane Grey, who had written so vividly of the canyon's wildness, lamented the coming of the automobile. He called it a sacrilege, a desecration of the sacred. But his was a minority voice. Most Americans embraced the highway. They saw it as progress, as democracy in action. The canyon belonged to everyone now, and everyone wanted to see it. The highway also transformed the towns along its route. Flagstaff, which had been a sleepy railroad and lumber town, became a tourist hub. Hotels sprang up on Santa Fe Avenue. Gas stations multiplied. The Chamber of Commerce printed maps and brochures, advertising Flagstaff as the gateway to the Grand Canyon. Smaller settlements like Val and Red Butte grew into clusters of motels and diners, places where families could stop for a hamburger and a cold drink before the final ascent. The Navajo and Hopi communities, whose lands bordered the highway, began selling jewelry and pottery to passing motorists. They set up roadside stands, trading silver and turquoise for folding money. It was a new economy, built on the highway's traffic. The highway also changed the way people experienced the canyon itself. Before the road, visitors had largely stayed at the Altavar Hotel or the Bright Angel Lodge, taking guided tour along the rim or riding mules down the trail. Now they came in their own cars, and they wanted independence. They wanted to explore on their own terms. They drove to Desert View, far to the east, where the watchtower built by Mary Coulter offered a panoramic view. They drove to Lipan Point, where the Colorado River twisted like a silver thread. They drove to Grandview, where the old copper mine and the rickety cableway still stood as relics of a bygone era. The highway gave them the freedom to roam, to stop wherever the view struck them, to linger or move on as they pleased. During the 193's, the Great Depression swept across the nation, but the Grand Canyon Highway kept bringing visitors. People who had lost everything still found the money for a gallon of gas and a camping permit. The park became a refuge, a place where the vastness of nature dwarfed the troubles of men. The Civilian Conservation Corps, one of President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs, sent young men to the canyon to build trails, roads, and buildings. They constructed the South Rim's iconic stone walls and the overlooks that still stand today. They improved the highway itself, widening curves and adding drainage to prevent washouts. The highway was no longer just a road. It was a lifeline, a symbol of hope in hard times. World War II brought a temporary pause to tourism. Gasoline rationing kept most Americans at home, and the Grand Canyon Highway grew quiet. The park saw only a trickle of visitors, mostly servicemen on leave, but the highway remained, waiting. When the war ended in 1945, the pent-up demand exploded. Returning soldiers, their families, and a new generation of Americans took to the road in unprecedented numbers. The highway became crowded again, more crowded than ever. The Park Service responded by widening the road, paving shoulders, and building a new entrance station. They also began planning a highway that would cross the canyon itself, connecting the South Rim to the North Rim. That project, known as the Grand Canyon Skywalk, would take decades to realize, but the idea was born in the post-war boom. By the 195's, the highway was no longer just a road to park. It was part of a larger network of roads that crisscrossed the West. The interstate highway system, championed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, transformed American travel. But the Grand Canyon Highway remained a two-lane road, a deliberate choice to preserve the sense of journey. Motorists approached the canyon slowly, climbing through the Kaibab National Forest, passing through meadows and stands of ponderosa pine. The road curved and dipped, offering glimpses of the canyon through the trees, building anticipation until the final moment when the rim opened up and the full immensity of the gorge appeared. That approach became part of the experience, as iconic as the view itself. The highway also brought new challenges. As automobile traffic increased, so did the need for parking. By the 196's, the park's main parking lot at Mather Point was overflowing. On busy summer days, cars lined the shoulder of the highway for miles. The Park Service had to impose restrictions, limiting the number of vehicles allowed into the park at any one time. They built additional parking lots at Desert View and Hermit's Rest, and they introduced a shuttle bus system to reduce congestion. The highway had created a paradox. The very road that made the canyon accessible was now threatening to overwhelm it. Environmentalists began to raise concerns. The highway brought noise, exhaust fumes, and light pollution. The constant hum of engines disturbed the silence that had once defined the canyon. Birds and animals retreated from the rim. The air quality deteriorated, especially on hazy summer days when smog from Los Angeles drifted east and mixed with local emissions. Studies showed that visibility at the canyon had decreased by as much as 50% on some days. The very reason people came, the clarity of the view, was being compromised by the highway's traffic. In the 1970s and 1980s, a series of battles erupted over the future of the highway. Some proposed building a bypass road to divert traffic away from the park. Others called for a ban on private vehicles altogether, forcing visitors to use trains or shuttle buses. The debate reflected a deeper tension between access and preservation, a tension that had existed since the first automobile rolled up to the rim. The highway was both a blessing and a curse. It had made the Grand Canyon famous, but it had also made it vulnerable. Meanwhile, the highway continued to evolve. In the 1990s, the road was repaved and realigned in places. New signs were installed and rest areas were improved. The Park Service built a new visitor center at Mather Point, with exhibits explaining the canyon's geology and human history. The highway became a scenic byway, designated as part of the Grand Canyon National Park System. It was no longer just a road, it was an attraction in its own right. Travel guides recommended the drive itself, calling it one of the most beautiful in America. Today, the highway carries more than 4 million visitors each year. Traffic jams are still common, especially during spring break and summer. The Park Service has implemented a reservation system for parking, and the shuttle buses run continuously. The highway is a living monument to the democratization of nature, a testament to the belief that every American deserves to stand on the edge of the abyss. But it is also a reminder that nothing comes without a cost. The road that brought the world to the Grand Canyon also brought the world's problems: overcrowding, pollution, and the constant struggle to balance wonder with wear. Yet for all its flaws, the highway remains a story of triumph. It is a story of vision and persistence, of men and women who believed that a canyon should not be hidden. They built a road through rock and desert, through snow and heat, and they opened a door that has never closed. The highway is the reason the Grand Canyon is not just a place on a map, but a place in the American soul. It is the reason that families from every state, from every background, can pull over at a pullout and feel that same jolt of awe that first struck John Wesley Powell. The highway did not create the canyon, but it made the canyon ours. And so we continue down that road, generations later, still driving, still looking, still marveling. The highway stretches ahead, a black ribbon through the pinyon and juniper, and beyond it the canyon waits. It waits in the same silence it has known for millions of years, patient and vast, indifferent to the cars that line its rim. But we are not indifferent. We come because we must. We come because the highway calls us, because the canyon calls us, because the open road and the open sky are part of what it means to be American. The highway that made the Grand Canyon famous is, in the end, a highway into ourselves. It is a road to wonder, and wonder never ends. The highway does not end at the rim. It continues, in a sense, into the memories of those who travel it. A family from Ohio packing their station wagon in 1965, their father squinting at a paper map, their mother packing peanut butter sandwiches and a cooler of lemonade. They drove for days, crossing the Mississippi, climbing the Great Plains, feeling the air change as they entered the high desert of Arizona. They sang songs, fought over the radio, counted license plates from distant states. The highway was a ribbon of anticipation, and when they finally turned off Route 66 onto the road that climbed toward the canyon, the children pressed their faces to the windows. The trees grew taller, the sky wider, and then suddenly the world fell away. The father pulled over at the first pullout, and the family stood in silence, the wind tugging at their clothes, the canyon stretching beyond anything they could have imagined. That moment became part of their family lore, told and retold at reunions, passed down to grandchildren who would one day make the same drive. The highway gave them that moment, and that moment gave them a story that would outlive them. Consider the countless such stories, each one unique, each one woven into the fabric of the American experience. The highway is a stage for dramas both large and small. A young couple on their honeymoon, their car breaking down just outside the park entrance, rescued by a ranger who towed them to the garage at Grand Canyon Village. They spent the night in a cabin, their plans disrupted, but they remembered that night as the best of their trip, sitting on the porch under a blanket of stars, the canyon invisible but present, like a secret waiting for dawn. A retired teacher from Maine, finally fulfilling a lifelong dream, driving alone for 3 weeks, talking to strangers at every rest stop, filling a journal with sketches and observations. She said the highway gave her courage, that the open road reminded her that life was still an adventure. A busload of schoolchildren from a reservation in New Mexico, their chaperones guiding them through the exhibits at the visitor center, the children's eyes wide as they saw the canyon for the first time. For some of them, it was a homecoming, a return to a landscape their ancestors had known, but through a different lens, through the window of a bus on a paved road. The highway also reshaped the communities that bordered the park. Towns like Tucson, just south of the South Rim, grew from dusty outposts into bustling gateway communities. Motels, gift shops, restaurants, and gas stations sprouted along the road, catering to the endless stream of tourists. Some locals welcomed the prosperity, others mourned the loss of a quieter, simpler way of life. The highway brought jobs and money, but it also brought crowds, noise, and the constant pressure to cater to outsiders. The balance between commerce and character became a delicate dance. In Tucson, a family-run diner served biscuits and gravy to park rangers and visitors alike for decades, its walls lined with photographs of the canyon from the early days. The owner, a man whose grandfather had helped build the original highway, said the road was both the best and worst thing to happen to the town. It gave them a living, but it also turned their home into a stop along the way, a place people passed through rather than stayed. North of the canyon, the highway to the North Rim told a different story. That road, State Route 67, was a dead end, a narrow ribbon that ended at the remote and less visited rim. It was a highway that demanded commitment, a 50-mile drive through the Kaibab Plateau, with no services, no cell reception, just forest and silence. Those who made the trip felt a sense of exclusivity, of having earned the view. The North Rim Highway was never widened, never commercialized, and it remained a testament to the idea that some places should be hard to reach. The contrast between the two highways reflected the tension at the heart of the Grand Canyon itself, the South Rim, accessible and bustling, versus the North Rim, remote and serene. The highways defined the experience as much as the canyon did, yet the highway's impact extended beyond the park boundaries. It brought the world to the doorstep of the Havasupai tribe, whose reservation lay deep in a side canyon, accessible only by foot or horseback before the highway. The tribe had lived there for centuries, their connection to the land unbroken. But as tourism boomed, the pressure to open their canyon to visitors grew. The Havasupai resisted, choosing to limit access to their sacred waterfalls and turquoise pools, requiring permits and hiking permits. The highway did not reach them directly, but it brought people to the region, people who wanted to see the hidden wonders they had read about in guidebooks. The tribe adapted, managing a small but steady stream of tourists, maintaining control over their land while still benefiting from the highway's traffic. It was a delicate balance, a negotiation between tradition and modernity, and the highway was the conduit for that negotiation. Similarly, the Hualapai tribe, on the western edge of the canyon, saw an opportunity. In 2007, they opened the Grand Canyon Skywalk, a glass bridge that extended over the rim, offering a vertiginous view of the Colorado River 1,000 feet below. The skywalk was built to attract the hordes of tourists who came to the South Rim, to divert some of that traffic to a tribal enterprise. The highway to the skywalk, a 2-lane road through the desert, was improved and paved, and suddenly a new destination emerged. The Hualapai invested in hotels, restaurants, and souvenir shops, creating a tourist economy that lifted their community. But the skywalk also sparked controversy. Critics said it commercialized the canyon, that the glass bridge was a gimmick that detracted from the natural wonder. The Hualapai countered that it was their land, their heritage, and they had the right to develop it as they saw fit. The highway made that development possible, and the debate over the skywalk became a larger debate about who owns the Grand Canyon and who gets to tell its story. The highway also became a battleground for environmental activism. In the 190s, a proposal to build a tramway that would carry visitors from the rim down to the river gained traction. The tramway would have required a new road, a parking structure, and a massive infrastructure project that would scar the canyon walls. Environmental groups fought it fiercely, arguing that the canyon should remain wild, that visitors should earn the view through hiking or mule rides. The highway had already brought too many people, they said, and a tramway would only worsen the problem. The debate raged for years, with studies, hearings, and protests. In the end, the tramway was shelved, but the issue never fully died. It resurfaced in different forms: a proposal for a light rail system from Tucson to the rim, a plan to expand the shuttle bus network, a call for a reservation system that would limit the number of cars allowed into the park. Each proposal faced the same fundamental question: how much access is too much? The highway itself became a symbol of that question. On busy weekends, traffic backed up for miles, and the park closed its gates when the parking lots were full. Frustrated drivers turned around, their trip ruined, or they waited for hours in the heat. The highway that had promised freedom now delivered gridlock. Some argued for a radical solution: close the highway to private vehicles entirely, require visitors to arrive by train or bus. The idea was not new. the Grand Canyon Railway had been running from Williams, Arizona, since 1901, and it still offered a scenic, nostalgic journey. But the railway could only carry a fraction of the visitors. Most people preferred the flexibility of their own car, the ability to stop at will, to explore side roads, to camp in the national forest. The highway was not just a means of transportation, it was a way of life. The Park Service tried to strike a balance. They expanded the shuttle system, building new routes that connected the main viewpoints, allowing visitors to park once and ride. They introduced timed entry reservations, limiting the number of vehicles that could enter during peak hours. They built new parking lots farther from the rim, with shuttle stops at the trailheads. The highway remained open, but its role was changing. It was no longer the sole highway to wonder. It was part of a system, a piece of a larger puzzle. The days of freewheeling exploration, of driving up and parking at the rim, were fading. The highway had become a managed resource, subject to the same constraints as the canyon itself. Yet the highway endured. It endured through the rise of the interstate, through the oil crises of the 1970s, through the recession of 2008, through the pandemic of 2010. Each crisis reshaped how people used the highway, but none stopped them from coming. During the pandemic, when many parks closed, the Grand Canyon remained open, and the highway carried a steady stream of visitors seeking solace in nature. Families parked at overlooks and spread out picnic blankets, maintaining distance but sharing the same view. The highway became a lifeline for mental health, a place where people could breathe, where they could escape the fear and uncertainty of a world in turmoil. The rangers, masked and gloved, directed traffic and answered questions, their voices muffled but their dedication clear. The highway had seen wars and depressions, and it saw this too, and it kept carrying people forward. Today, the highway is undergoing another transformation. Electric vehicles are becoming common, and charging stations are appearing at the visitor center and in Tucson. The road itself is being retrofitted with energy-efficient lighting, and the Park Service is exploring the use of autonomous shuttles to reduce the number of human-driven cars. The highway is becoming smarter, more sustainable, but the essential experience remains unchanged. The approach, the climb, the first glimpse of the canyon, that moment when the horizon opens and the earth falls away, that is still the same. The highway has not lost its magic, it has simply evolved. Consider the night. Long after the last shuttle bus has run, after the gift shops have closed and the restaurants have cleared their tables, the highway grows quiet. The stars come out, unpolluted by city lights, and the canyon glows in the moonlight. A lone car might pass, its headlights sweeping across the pinyon, its engine a low hum in the silence. The driver pulls over at an empty overlook, shuts off the engine, and steps out. The cold air bites, the wind whispers through the juniper, and the canyon stretches like a wound in the earth, dark and deep. That driver is alone but not lonely. The highway has brought them here to this moment, and the highway will take them back. The highway is the thread that connects the ordinary world to the extraordinary, and in the darkness it feels almost sacred. The highway is also a place of community. On a busy summer day, the pullouts are filled with families from Japan, Germany, India, Brazil, every corner of the globe. They speak different languages, eat different foods, wear different clothes, but they share the same expression: awe. They point, they take photographs, they call out to each other, and then they return to their cars and continue down the highway. The highway is a melting pot, a place where strangers share a moment of wonder. It is the great equalizer, the road that levels all differences in the face of the canyon's immensity. The highway has its own seasons. In spring, the snow melts and the wildflowers bloom along the shoulders, yellow and purple and red. In summer, the heat shimmers off the asphalt, and the pine trees provide patches of shade. In autumn, the aspen turn gold, and the air is crisp and clear. In winter, the highway can be treacherous with ice and snow, but the few who brave it are rewarded with a canyon dusted in white, a view that few ever see. Each season brings a different experience, a different relationship to the road and the canyon. The highway has also become a destination for road cyclists, who pedal the 70 miles from Williams to the South Rim, climbing through the forest, feeling the burn in their legs, and then coasting down to the rim with the wind in their faces. They are a different breed of traveler, more intimate with the road, more aware of its contours and curves. They stop at the same pullouts, but they arrive with a sense of accomplishment, a physical connection to the journey. The highway rewards them with a view that feels earned, and the highway continues to inspire artists and writers. Photographers line the overlooks at sunrise, their tripods set, their cameras clicking. Painters set up easels on the rim, capturing the changing light. Poets scribble in notebooks, trying to put words to the ineffable. The highway is their muse, the road that leads to inspiration. It has been featured in countless films, from westerns to road movies, and it has been the backdrop for novels and memoirs. The highway is not just a road, it is a character in the American story. As we look to the future, the highway faces new uncertainties. Climate change is altering the ecosystem of the canyon, with longer droughts and more intense wildfires. The highway itself becomes a fire break, a line of asphalt that can stop a blaze, but also a source of heat and pollution. The Park Service is studying how to make the highway more resilient, how to adapt to a changing world. There are plans to plant more native vegetation along the shoulders, to improve drainage to handle flash floods, to use recycled materials in repaving. The highway is being reimagined as a sustainable corridor, a model for how roads can coexist with nature. But the most profound question is not about the highway itself. It is about the people who travel it. Will they continue to come? Will the next generation see the Grand Canyon as a must-see destination, or will they find their wonder elsewhere? The highway has faced competition before, from airplanes and cruise ships and virtual reality, yet every year the numbers climb. The highway has a gravitational pull that transcends trends. It is not just a road, it is a rite of passage. To drive the Grand Canyon Highway is to participate in a tradition that stretches back a century, to join the millions who have made the same journey, to feel the same awe. And so the highway rolls on, a ribbon of asphalt through the high desert, carrying the hopes and dreams of every traveler who turns onto it. It is a road that leads to the edge of the world and beyond that edge to the infinite. It is a road that makes the Grand Canyon famous, that make it tangible, that make it ours. And as long as there are people who want to see the canyon, the highway will be there, waiting, ready to take them. The journey never ends, the wonder never fades. The highway that made the Grand Canyon famous is, in the end, a highway into the heart of the American experience, and it will carry us forward into the unknown, into the light. But the story does not end at the rim, nor at the overlook, nor even at the visitor center. The highway continues beyond the south rim, winding northward toward the north rim, a journey that takes a full day by car, looping around the canyon's vastness. That northern spur, State Route 67, is a different kind of road, narrower, more remote, closed by snow for half the year. It cuts through the Kaibab Plateau, a forest of towering ponderosa pines and quaking aspen, where elk wander across the asphalt and the air smells of earth and resin. This highway, too, has its own history. It was built later in the 193's rows as a way to open the North Rim to travelers, but it never attracted the same crowds. The North Rim remains quieter, more solitary, a place for the dedicated few. Yet the two highways are connected, two arms of the same beast, each leading to a different view of the same wonder. The South Rim Highway is the showman, the North Rim Highway the mystic. Together, they frame the canyon. Think of the workers who maintain these roads. The highway crews, men and women who rise before dawn, who drive plows and graders and dump trucks, who lay asphalt in the heat of summer and scrape ice in the bitter cold. They know every curve, every pothole, every patch of frost that lingers into spring. They are the unsung guardians of the journey. When a rockfall blocks the road, they are there with dynamite and bulldozers, clearing the way. When a blizzard buries the asphalt, they are there with plows and salt, fighting the white blindness. Their hands are calloused, their faces weathered, but they carry a quiet pride. They know that they are not just maintaining a road, they are maintaining a connection. The highway is their charge, and they treat it with a kind of reverence. In the break rooms of the maintenance yards, there are photographs of the canyon tacked to the walls, snapshots taken at sunrise, at sunset, in the rain, in the snow. These workers see the canyon every day, but they never tire of it. They know that the highway is a living thing, requiring constant attention, constant care. There is a story told by a ranger with a soft voice and a faraway look, about a family who drove the highway in a vintage Ford Model T, back when the road was still gravel and dust. They had come from Ohio, a father, a mother, and 3 children, crammed into the car with blankets and a crate of apples. The father had read about the canyon in a magazine and had decided on a whim to take his family to see it. They drove for weeks through the flat plains, across the Mississippi, into the dry heat of the Southwest. When they finally reached the highway, the father stopped the car and got out. He knelt on the ground and touched the gravel, as if to confirm it was real. Then he climbed back in and drove. The family spent 3 days at the canyon, camping on the rim, watching the sun rise and set. They had no camera, no souvenirs, only memories. The mother later said that the journey itself was the gift, the road that carried them to the edge of the world. That story is not unique. It is told in different versions by thousands of families. The highway is a stage for these stories, a setting for the drama of ordinary lives meeting extraordinary landscapes. And what of the people who live along the highway? The town of Tucson, just a few miles from the South Rim, exists because of the road. It started as a tiny settlement, a place for travelers to rest and refuel. Now it is a cluster of hotels, restaurants, gift shops, and gas stations. The residents are a mix of Park Service employees, hospitality workers, and retirees who fell in love with the canyon and never left. They live with the constant hum of traffic, the shifting tides of tourists, the rhythm of the seasons. In summer, the streets are packed, the hotels full, the restaurants serving burgers and tacos until late. In winter, the town grows quiet, the sidewalks empty, the neon signs dimmed. The locals have a saying, "We live where you vacation." They know the canyon not as a spectacle, but as a neighbor. They hike its trails on their days off. They watch the condors circle overhead. They feel the ground shake when a rock falls deep in the inner gorge. The highway is their lifeline, their connection to the outside world. When it closes due to weather or accident, they feel it acutely. The highway is not just a road. It is the town's bloodstream, carrying supplies, mail, medicine, and visitors. Without it, Tucson would be a ghost town. The highway also carries stories of tragedy. There have been accidents, some fatal, on the winding curves and in the sudden storms. A car that missed a turn, a driver who fell asleep at the wheel, a deer that leaped out of the darkness. The highway has a dark side, a reminder that the journey is not always safe. The rangers tell of a mother who lost her child on a hike, who drove the highway in desperation, searching for a signal for help, for hope. The highway became a corridor of anxiety, a conduit for grief. But it also became a path for rescue, for the ambulance that rushed down the road, for the helicopter that landed on a pullout. The highway is a place of both danger and salvation, a thin line between the wild and the civilized. There is a lesser-known history of the highway, too, involving the indigenous peoples of the region. The Havasupai, the Hualapai, the Navajo, the Hopi, they have lived in and around the canyon for millennia. Their trails crossed the canyon long before any road was built. The modern highway, in many ways, disrupted their way of life, bringing thousands of visitors to lands that were once remote and sacred. Yet the highway also brought opportunities, a chance to share their cultures, to sell crafts, to guide tourists. Some tribal members work as rangers, interpreters, and guides on the highway, telling their own stories of the canyon. They speak of the canyon as a living being, a place of creation and spirit. The highway, for them, is a double-edged sword. It brings revenue and recognition, but it also brings intrusion and commodification. The Park Service has worked to build partnerships with the tribes, to include their perspectives in the interpretation of the canyon. At the Desert View Watchtower, a structure built in the 193s by a Hopi architect, visitors can see the canyon through indigenous eyes. The highway leads them there, but the lesson is that the canyon is not just a geological wonder, it is a sacred home. The highway itself has a geology. The asphalt is laid over ancient rock, the Kaibab limestone that forms the rim of the canyon. The road cuts through layers of time, past fossils of sea creatures that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. When you drive the highway, you're driving over the remains of an ancient ocean. The road builders knew this. They blasted through ridges and filled in valleys, but they could not change the fundamental fact that the highway is a thin ribbon of human construction atop an unfathomable depth of Earth's history. Every mile is a lesson in deep time. The road rises and falls with the terrain, following the contours of the plateau. In some places, the road is level, a straight shot through the forest. In others, it twists and turns, hugging the edge of a cliff, the canyon visible through the trees. The engineers who designed the highway were not just builders, they were artists, placing the road to create moments of revelation, to frame the view, to build anticipation. Consider the pullouts. There are dozens of them along the highway, each with a name: Pipe Creek Vista, Mather Point, Yavapai Observation Station, Grandview Point, Morin Point, Lipan Point, Desert View. Each pullout offers a different perspective. Some face east, some west, some north. Some show the canyon in its full breadth, others focus on a single butte or a narrow gorge. The highway is a gallery, and the pullouts are the viewing stations. The best time to visit them is at sunrise, when the light is low and the shadows are long. The canyon comes alive in the morning, the colors shifting from pink to gold to orange. The highway at sunrise is a place of pilgrims, people who have set alarms, who have braved the cold, who have driven in the dark to witness the first light. They stand at the railings, coffee cups in hand, cameras at ready, and they wait. The sun crests the rim, and the canyon ignites. It is a moment that cannot be captured, only experienced. The highway delivers them to that moment, and then it carries them away, back to the world changed. The highway is also a place of quiet rebellion. There are those who refuse to follow the rules, who park on the shoulder to get a better shot, who hike off-trail, who feed the squirrels, who ignore the signs. The rangers have seen it all. They have a patience that borders on sainthood, ability to smile and explain the same rules 100 times a day. They know that the highway is a stage for human nature, for the best and worst of behavior. But they also know that most visitors are good, that they want to protect the canyon, that they just need a little guidance. The highway is a classroom, and the rangers are the teachers. They teach about geology, about ecology, about history, about respect. They teach that the canyon is fragile, that the highway is a privilege, not a right. And then there are the nights. The highway at night is a different realm. The stars are so bright they cast shadows. The air is thin and cold, and the silence is profound. A car's headlights create a cone of light that sweeps across the landscape, illuminating a boulder, a tree, a deer. The highway is a thin line of safety in the vast darkness. For the few who travel it at night, there is a sense of intimacy, of being alone with the canyon. The sound of the tires on the asphalt is a steady hum, a heartbeat. The driver might stop at an overlook and shut off the engine, and then there is nothing but the wind and the stars. The canyon is a black void, a hole in the world, and the highway is the edge. It is a place for reflection, for quiet thought. Some people have proposed their life partner on that highway, on that overlook under the stars. Some have scattered ashes there, letting the wind carry their loved one into the canyon. The highway holds these memories, these moments of love and loss, joy and sorrow. It is not just a road, it is a repository of human emotion. As we consider the future, the highway will continue to evolve. Electric vehicles will become the norm, and the highway will need more charging stations, perhaps solar-powered, blending into the landscape. Autonomous vehicles may change the nature of the journey, allowing drivers to sit back and watch the scenery without the stress of traffic, but the essential human need for wonder will remain. The highway will adapt, as it always has. The question is not whether the highway will survive, but whether the experience of driving it will retain its magic. The magic is not in the asphalt or the paint stripes or the guardrails. The magic is in the moment when a person, sitting in a car, crests a hill and sees the canyon for the first time. That moment is timeless. It will happen again tomorrow, and the day after, and 100 years from now. The highway is simply the vessel for that moment. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal, about a man who drove the highway every day for 40 years. He was a geologist, a professor from Flagstaff who spent his summers studying the canyon. He knew every layer of rock, every fault line, every fossil. He drove the highway hundreds of times, but he never grew bored. Each trip, he said, was a new journey. He would stop at the same pullout at the same time of day and see something different. A cloud, a shadow, a bird, a shift in the light. He believed that the highway was a path to understanding, that the canyon revealed itself only to those who came back again and again. He died in his sleep at the age of 93, and his family scattered his ashes at Yavapai Point. The highway carried him home one last time. The highway that made the Grand Canyon famous is not just a road. It is a testament to human ambition and humility. It is a line drawn across the map, a line that millions have followed, a line that leads to the edge of the world. It is a reminder that the greatest wonders are not found at the destination alone, but in the journey that takes us there. The highway is a story, and that story continues to unfold with every traveler who turns onto it, with every family that packs the car, with every loner who drives in the dark. The highway is alive, breathing, pulsing with the energy of all who have passed before. And as the sun sets on another day, as the shadows lengthen and the stars begin to appear, the highway waits, patient and eternal, ready for the next traveler, ready to lead them into the unknown, into the light, into the heart of the Grand Canyon. The journey never ends. The wonder never fades. The highway that made the Grand Canyon famous is, in the end, a highway into the soul of the world, and it will carry us forward into the future, into the infinite. Yet even as we speak of infinity, there are tangible details that anchor this highway in the real world. Consider the road itself, the asphalt and the striping, the guardrails that catch the glare of headlights. These are mundane things, but they are also the tools of a story. Every guardrail has been repaired, every sign replaced, every mile of asphalt resurfaced. The highway is a living thing, constantly maintained, constantly renewed. There is a crew that drives it every day, checking for cracks, clearing debris, painting lines. They know the highway better than anyone. They see it in all seasons, in all weather, under the harsh summer sun and the winter snow. They know where the frost heaves the pavement, where the deer cross, where the wind scours the road. They are the unsung keepers of the wonder, the ones who ensure that the highway is safe for the next traveler. Their work is invisible, but without it, the highway would crumble, and the canyon would be silent, a place only for the hardiest of hikers. There is a specific stretch of the highway, about 5 miles east of Grand Canyon Village, where the road runs parallel to an ancient lava flow. The rocks there are black and jagged, a stark contrast to the soft reds and yellows of the canyon. The lava came from a volcano that erupted long before humans walked the earth, and it flowed down into the gorge, damming the Colorado River. The river eventually cut through the dam, but the lava remains, a reminder that the canyon is not static, that it is still being shaped by forces beneath the surface. The highway passes this lava flow without ceremony, just another mile marker, but for those who know, it is a moment of deep time. The asphalt hums over the black rock, and the driver feels a subtle vibration, a connection to the fire that once roared here. The highway is a time machine, rolling through epochs with every turn of the wheel. And then there are the people who work at the canyon, the lodge employees, the shopkeepers, the waitstaff, the janitors. Many of them live in the village, in modest apartments and trailers, and they drive the highway to and from work every day. For them, the canyon is not a vacation, it is a backdrop. They see it in the early morning when the tourists are still asleep, and in the late evening when the last shuttle has departed. They have their favorite pullouts, their private spots where they go to eat lunch or watch the sunset. They know the highway as a commute, a routine, but they also know its magic. Ask any of them and they will have a story. The time a bison blocked the road for an hour, the time a couple got married at Lip End Point, the time a hawk followed a car for miles, riding the thermals. The highway is their lifeline, connecting them to the world beyond the rim. They are the custodians of the canyon's daily life, and the highway is their constant companion. The highway also has its ghosts. There are stories of a woman in white who appears at the side of the road near the south rim, a hitchhiker who vanishes when the car stops. Some say she is a spirit of the canyon, a guardian who tests the kindness of travelers. Others say she is the ghost of a pioneer who died in a wagon accident a century ago. The rangers do not talk about her, but the locals know. They say that if you pick her up, she will sit in the back seat and say nothing, and then you will blink and she will be gone. The highway is a place of stories, some true, some legend, all woven into the fabric of the place. These stories add a layer of mystery, a sense that the highway is more than a road, that it is a threshold between worlds. As we near the end of this journey, it is worth remembering that the highway that made the Grand Canyon famous is not unique. There are other scenic roads, other routes to wonder, but this one is different because of what it leads to. The canyon is a place that demands humility, that reminds us of our smallness. The highway is the vessel that brings us to that humility. It is a road of transformation, of conversion. People drive in as tourists and leave as pilgrims. They come for the view and stay for the silence. They come with expectations and leave with questions. The highway does not answer those questions. It only provides the space to ask them. And so we return to where we began, the idea that the highway is not just a road but a story. And like all good stories, it ends where it started, at the rim of the canyon, with the vast emptiness before us and the thin line of asphalt behind us. The highway has carried us here, and now it waits, ready to carry us back. But the journey does not end. The wonder does not fade. The highway that made the Grand Canyon famous is, in the end, a highway into the soul of the world, and it will carry us forward, into the future, into the infinite. And beyond that, into the next turn, the next mile, the next sunrise over a canyon that has no end.